this hangboard protocol that we talked about in the last podcast, like 2 years ago, is kind of my recruitment protocol nowadays. So I do that 6 weeks in advance, and it quite quickly. For anybody listening, I guess I could clarify what I meant by that. The no hang protocol is a protocol that I do 2 times per day, where I just gently load my fingers. So I'm not pushing them as you would do on like a max hang session or anything like that. I'm just kind of tugging a bit on holds for 10 minutes. And what it's definitely done for me is help recruit a lot of my muscle fibers and just get my body more like ready to climb, I guess. And when I was doing that in preparation for the trip, it was pretty apparent that as soon as I started that, my body got used to the new weight, to climb with that new weight.
Well, that's fascinating because you're doing that protocol with your feet on the ground, right? And you're just taking like a percentage of your weight. So that's that's really interesting that doing that allowed you to adjust to the new weight. So it sounds like periodically you still come back to that protocol and you'll just do it for 30 days.
Yeah, exactly. I do it for about 6 weeks before any form of like performance type thing. So if it's a competition or some climb that I want to do outdoors or so, I always try and plan for like 6 weeks of that. Yeah.
Okay. Do you feel like you've gotten long-term gains from doing that, or is it just like a shorter term kind of tune-up? What do you think is happening there?
So I think it's definitely a short-term tune-up. Like I don't think you can have really progressive overload of any sort with that. Like you can't get much stronger fingers. But I think for people who can't, like when you can't climb very, very often. So for me, for instance, I'm editing a lot. So I'm in front of the computer for like 10 hours a day. And I try and squeeze in as much, like I have a pretty flexible schedule, so I can climb quite regularly as I want. But when I'm sitting still so much, I think this protocol helps me just kind of rewire my body. So like every 6 hours, it's good for it to get used to movement of some sort. And I think the finger part of that movement is the most important to the climbing. So that's why I think it works so well for me, for instance. I think it's good to do it for like 4 to 6 weeks. That's definitely what I believe. My brother's kept on doing it for 2 years straight now, and he's just he's just feeling healthy in his fingers from it, which is his benefit. And I do still feel that benefit, but if I'm doing it as a person, I have a hard time like just doing it for healthy fingers if my fingers aren't, or if they're already healthy. So I have more of like a goal with it, which is like I want to get slightly stronger fingers. I want to get them working again. But every time that I do it, my finger strength definitely goes back up again. And I feel much more comfortable hanging on a hangboard and just climbing on the wall to like pull harder. Yeah.
Have you heard of greasing the groove? Are you familiar with that phrase?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. Does that make sense to you? I feel like it's this greasing the groove thing where this is like a phrase from weightlifting where rather than training heavy, I think I learned this from Pavel Tsatsulin, the Russian kettlebell guy, but he'll just do like, a little bit of volume throughout the day, kind of every day, and just kind of recruit, just get that like that wiring between your brain and those muscles like super, super, I guess, dialed in or coded or whatever for the movement that you're doing. Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that's kind of where it all comes from. It's just reminding your body what you're doing, kind of.
Yeah. That's fascinating. That's something you still do, and you do it for 4 to 6 weeks. Is that like right before, like the last thing you do before a performance phase?
Yeah, you could say so. Yeah. I mean, it's like I was doing it from early November until we left in the middle of December. So those 6 weeks when I was still training pretty intensely, but kind of like, okay, now I'm going to start getting to the peak of the training phase of like trying to build all of this and trying to become stronger. And then I just kept going with the same intensity of the no hangs for the entire duration. But at the end of that cycle, just before we left, I was doing much shorter sessions on the kilter board and the spray wall.
I'm curious about your fingers. So, Story of Two Worlds, obviously it's hard enough that it has a very fingery element to it because everything V15, in that range is very fingery, or demands a high degree of finger strength. but it seems more squeezy, maybe body power, things like that. But then the fact that you went back to off the wagon, like we teased earlier, and that's like, so, you know, a problem that you seem obsessed with, and you had set simulators of it and stuff, and that one arm campus through move, you know, was something that was maybe doable but hard for you, and you came back and it just seems like you just smashed it and it seemed easy. So that's a real testament to just pure raw finger strength gains.
Yeah, like off the wagon was such a great experience. I'm so happy I went there, because at the time I was like slightly obsessing of Story of Two Worlds. Like I was gonna do it, and then there was this day where the conditions weren't great, so I was like, well, I don't want to spend too much energy here. Like I have a lot of other things that I want to try on this trip, and I don't want to get too sucked in. So we moved over to off the wagon, and the thing is, like, this finger strength element is the thing that often in weight becomes the question, right? Like, oh, can you be heavy and have strong fingers? And that's where it became so apparent that yes, you can have strong fingers. I just hopped on the campus move and did it right away. Like it felt incredibly easy. I did it like 4 or 5 times in a row, just every single go.
Wow.
Which, relative to when I tried it the year before at 76, like I was working on it for maybe 2 hours that session, and I, like, you could argue I got close, but I never even like held the swing at all in the jug. So it was a shocking difference in strength on that boulder, actually. Like there it was like, okay, something's happened. Because it's hard to confirm. Like, yes, I set those benchmarks in November that I talked about earlier, and I knew to a degree that I was stronger. But like you're saying, I had never tried Story of Two Worlds on a previous trip, so it wasn't really, I couldn't say like, oh, I've definitely gotten better, because I couldn't really put it to the test on anything. But then on Off the Wagon, was kind of like my, okay, it's cemented. Like, I'm going to continue doing this type of training for the next season, which I'm doing right now, and like this works for me.
That's awesome.
I think finger strength is when you're that's the thing though. I think when you're first gaining weight and you're trying to kind of bulk up, if you're taking creatine or just eating more or whatever, you do feel a slight decline, and you think like, oh dang, I'm losing the most important aspect to my climbing, because finger strength is the most important aspect to climbing from my perspective. Like, there are, of course, elements to climbing when it's not the most important, but generally speaking, if you don't have the finger strength, you can't apply any power or technique or anything else. Like, you do need to be able to hold on to the holds to climb.